Necessary Evil sought to do a classic hard-boiled detective story right. No Dixon Hill winking at the camera, no, I'm being so clever that I'm actually quite stupid, like we'd eventually get with Ex Post Facto, but an honest-to-God attempt to create one of those pulp stories in Star Trek with sincerity. And it worked. It kicks off, appropriately, by showing us that it was a dark and stormy night, where Palra, this Bajoran woman, is talking to Quark about old times back on the station. Seems her husband was once murdered and Odo always suspected her of being the killer, so she wants to hire Quark to break into their old shop and retrieve a box that's hidden in the wall. Sentimental stuff, that's why she'd rather pay 5 bars of latinum while standing in a house where she can't even keep the lights on. It's that sentimental of a thing that she's willing to do that. It's her favorite strap-on, I think. But when Shadowy Man shows up after Quark's departure, she seems to have found a better way to spend that money than on a little B&E job. After the titles, we get the first and only time that Odo will be doing a station log report, to provide that oh-so-important inner monologue for our hard-boiled detective. The only time that he gives a log is in the Crash Runabout episode, I believe. Odo's log is the appropriately graveled tone and shows his overall disapproval of the need to document every frickin' thing.
The reason for this exercise is beyond my comprehension, except perhaps that humans have a compulsion to keep records and lists and files.
Hey, not all humans have compulsions. I personally make sure I don't have any by checking every day at 8:03 a.m. while washing my hands.
So many, in fact, that they have to invent new ways to store them microscopically. Otherwise, their records would overrun all known civilization.
Yeah, that seems like a joke, but then you remember that big thing the NSA is building in the Utah desert, and all you can say is, yeah, we are large bald squirrels burying our acorns.
My own very adequate memory not being good enough for Starfleet, I am pleased to put my voice to this official record of this day. Everything's under control.
Odo minored in sarcasm back in college. As soon as it's lights out, Quark and Rom sneak off to get into that shop. This was early season 2, remember, so they were experimenting with changes to Rom's character, making him seem smarter than he acts. Although, since he acts pretty stupid, that's not really saying much, I suppose. He manages to crack the lock in less than half the time that Quark said it would take, and with a little bit of chemical daring-do, he drops the panel off the wall in seconds. Explained that he learned both these skills to be able to get into Quark's storeroom and vault in order to run the business properly. But while he's hoping to get Quark's approval, all Quark can think is that Rom must be a thief, even though it'd be idiotic to admit that he did all of that. Which probably explains why Quark thinks he did. Quark unseals the box that he found, and there's a list of 8 Bajoran names inside. But Shadowy Man shows up, takes the list, and shoots Quark point blank. And it really should be noted, when Quark was confronted in Move Along Home with having to choose someone to die, he kneeled down and groveled on the floor to try to stop it. But here, facing certain death, there's just grim resignation, which shows that he both has a conscience and is pretty brave, actually. While the dying Quark is being treated, Odo tells Sisko that Rom's not telling everything he knows, which is surprising, given that he knows like 12 things at most. So they quickly get into the good cop, bad cop routine, once Odo points out that if Quark dies, Rom would get the bar, hence he has a motive.
You're not suggesting that
I've had my eye on you for a long time, Rom. You're not as stupid as you look.
I am too!
I don't think the jury's going to even leave the box before acquitting Rom based on that. Eventually he gives in and tells them everything, and when they arrive, the reminder that this was the old chemist shop brings Odo right into a flashback, to when the Cardassians were running things, and Odo was summoned here to meet with Gul Dukat. They bring up the time that Odo was unveiled for the Overlords, where he did this Cardassian neck trick thing, which I guess amused the observers to no end, but it irritates Odo just thinking about it. He didn't stick around doing that trick forever. Odo felt that there was more to learn if he could leave the lab and just, get out into the world and see what's out there. And now he gets to see something really new. A murder victim! Go on, touch it. We've all been doing it. He's brought Odo here to investigate the murder despite having no experience at it whatsoever.
My superiors would have me solve this murder by rounding up 10 Bajorans at random and executing them.
It's like the old parenting trick. Dad catches you smoking, so he makes you smoke the whole pack thing. If you're going to kill each other, we'll kill you until you're sick of being killed. That'll learn you. Ducat's picked Odo because he's had experience sorting out petty disputes since he's a neutral outsider. An outsider is exactly the word to use. This Odo looks uncomfortable around everyone, and it shows how much that remark of his from Season 1, "I have my work, what more do I need?" is genuine. He may be hesitant now, but Odo's discomfort will evaporate as he defines himself by being an enforcer of justice. Ducat takes Odo to Palra, the grieving widow, except as Odo observes, she isn't. She seems physically unfazed by it despite claims to the contrary. It might be her admission that the victim had been having an affair, although that seems more like a motive for her than for the other woman. The woman that she points out is Kira. Dun dun dun! Odo eyes her suspiciously, but not in the past, in the present, when Kira comes by and mentions the list and its possible connection to that murder way back when. As his log says, he hasn't stopped working on the case over the past 5 years. This is just a new thread for him to be able to finally close it, perhaps. He's a bit of OCD in that regard. Unfortunately, that path leads through the most unwelcoming desert, the mind of Rom, which at this moment is focused on acquiring the bar, even though Quark isn't actually dead yet. He tries helping Rom remember what happened.
Now, what do you see?
The bar,
Yes.
with my name on it.
The past, Rom, not the future.
Rom has great chemistry with Odo and Quark this episode. It really was well scripted and gave Grodenschick a chance to show his stuff. All Odo gets out of him is Chesso, which might be a name on the list. He might have remembered it slightly wrong, and also might have mixed it up with his grocery list and it was supposed to be Cheerios. We switch back to the past. A nice touch is that in the previous scene we'd had children running around playing on the promenade. When we switch back, we see 2 exhausted-looking waifs, too malnourished to even do more than hug their father when he returns from ore processing duty. This is the futility of what Odo's doing, trying to mete out justice in the midst of an unfathomably large injustice. Well, things are off to a rough start for our newfound private detective. Odo introduces himself the same way as someone offering a sack of bread for a quickie behind the stack of crates would. Once that's sorted out, though, and Odo explains that no, he doesn't do that kind of thing, he brings up the affair, which she denies. Just that they were acquaintances because he had tea, and he never said, "Now that you've tasted my tea, how about you taste my D?" And last night she was applying for a job at the Ferengi bar, and definitely not out killing anybody. The issue for her is Odo's relationship with the Cardassians. Why assign Odo when they could just beat the truth out of her? Something about this just doesn't make sense, and that Odo better figure it out because sooner or later he's going to have to decide whose side he's on with the Bajorans and Cardassians. Peter Allen Fields wrote an episode of Columbo once, so it's no surprise that he has Odo conduct the case in a similar way. For instance, he feigns ignorance of the meaning of a topic in order to get the person being interviewed to offer information. The answers can show what a person is trying to hide. In this case, Palra in the present is pleading ignorance of the list, and when she mentions Quark, it allows Odo a chance to mention that he's still alive without it seeming like he's baiting a trap. Also the Columbo, just one more thing about the issue of her power. Seems it was not a style choice for her to meet Quark like that. She couldn't pay the bill, so now she suddenly can. And they don't have payday loans on Bajor, so how'd she manage to pull that off? She dismisses it as a friend she can't drag into this. Yeah, that's definitely not going to seem suspicious, lady. In the course of questioning, he mentions Chesso, and the next day a guy named Cesaro winds up dead, and likely the actual name on the list. Odo springs into action. I'll need an autopsy on Cesaro, comm logs, access to bank records, and a flashback. It all is quickly delivered as he remembers his first encounter with Quark, a meeting of mutual respect.
I've heard about you. You do some Cardassian neck trick, am I right?
Not anymore.
I could go real big in this room.
More specifically, a meeting of mutual disrespect. Quark backs up Kira's alibi, but makes the mistake of implying that this service job he had started by her servicing him.
Tell me. She was showing me her initiative.
She'd rolled a natural 20 after all. Of course she wanted to show that to everyone else at the table.
Is that some sort of sexual reference?
And these jobs are hard to come by. Her credentials were, very impressive.
Quark learned everything about innuendo from 15-year-old boys. And then, we did it in the butt. We did the sex in the butt sex. Yeah! Well, Odo sees right through this and uses some of the lessons he's learned about humanoids. Like Data in Redemption last week, who had used a firm tone in emulation of Picard, so too is Odo likely mimicking the behavior of Cardassians questioning someone, not actually harming them, but having observed that even the implication of harm can have the effect. The difference between Odo and Data, obviously, is that while Data was observing to learn more about humanoids to change who he was to be more like them, I think Odo was observing to help identify himself through the contrast with them. In the present, Odo's investigations have paid off. Power contacted 8 people over the 2 days since the attack that she'd never spoken with before, and coincidentally all of them then transferred in 100,000 space bucks into her account. Blackmail, and most likely for collaborating with the Cardassians, until they all became stinking rich during the occupation, exploiting their own people's misery. Like a Schindler's List held on Bizarro World. When he showed up, Sisko and Dax commented that he looked like he'd just lost his best friend, and assumed that meant that Quark was dead. But no, Quark still clings to life as hard as he does in body parts. But then Odo gives a log entry about justice, about how it's the one thing he knows he got from his people, something intuitive about it. What's nicely done is that this isn't even a bait and switch. It seems like Odo's waxing philosophical, but the reality is that the mystery is solved and Odo's actions are proof of that. In the past, Kira is lying to him. About the only thing that isn't a lie is her admission that she lied about her alibi. Finally, she confesses, but not to the murder, to the sabotage in the ore processing center as part of her mission for the underground. Now's when he has to choose. While she is innocent of this crime, she is guilty of another. What does justice say about that? Is it unjust or just to perform sabotage against a great injustice? He decides to protect her and tells Dukat that he believes her to be innocent of the murder. In the present, the attempted murderer decides that he really needs to see this through to the end, so he goes in there to kill Quark. For practice, he kills the guard in the infirmary with a knife, and then tries smothering Quark. He doesn't get the knife and use that on Quark, because of course there's blood on it. You don't want to stab him with a dirty knife. That's just not hygienic at all. There he is. He shut everything down, smothering Quark. He's dying. Someone sound the alarm, quick! Rom doubles as Quark's security system. Obviously it didn't work out too well in the beta testing. They bring Power in, planning connecting her to the murderer. I'm assuming the deputy didn't make it. He barely had any lines. And of course, Quark will no doubt ID both of them when he recovers. But
you will never be able to prove that I killed my husband, because I didn't.
I know.
It was Rom. The problem with the murder was always the fact that there was no motive. Power lived a rather comfortable lifestyle thanks to her husband's work. There was no reason to risk all of that without a pretty obvious reason. But when he discovered the victim had a list of Bajoran collaborators, it explained why Gul Dukat kept away from the case by using Odo, to keep from drawing attention to Bajorans who were working for him, and that the killer was obviously working for the Resistance. The reason he looked like he lost his best friend was because he had. Because Kira was the murderer all along. And even after the occupation ended, she never told him the truth. When Dukat threatened Odo about the consequences for letting Kira go if she was guilty, Odo said that he doesn't lie. So when Kira asks if he can trust her again, all he can offer her is silence, unwilling to lie, and unwilling to say the unpleasant truth. Post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to Bashir for his "What kind of weapon I am waiting" line, giving it as insufferable a tone as possible. Final score for Necessary Evil is 9 out of 10. It's a mystery and character piece, and it excels at both. The direction is superb, wonderfully atmospheric, and really setting up the sense of life under an oppressive dictatorship, even for those situations that were otherwise routine, like it was a stink that gets into everything and dissolves every trace of joy. This would serve as the basis for most of the future episodes that looked into this oppressive past. Use of the normally expository log entries to instead serve as the hard-boiled detective inner monologue was truly inspired. It's a great script, great directing, great performances, great cinematography. This episode was a real sign of what Deep Space Nine could really get to if they plumbed the depths of what Star Trek offered. And despite my remarks about Rom's intelligence, he was in fine form this week. Look, I like Rom despite the way I smack him around. Whereas with Neelix, I smack him around because I don't like him at all. Need proof? Then tune in next week for Voyager's Once Upon a Time and see for yourself.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
You saved your brother's life.